What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel, Mr. KSM. I've got a story to share with you today that is straight up wild, and the craziest part, it's a true story. Someone reached out to me, dropped this experience in my inbox, and I knew I had to share it with all of you. Before we dive into the deep end, do me a huge favor, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We've got an insane goal to hit 100,000 subscribers in just 1 month. I know that sounds like a massive mountain to climb, but with this community, I know we can absolutely crush it. So if you haven't yet, hit that button and join the squad. All right, go grab your favorite drink, get settled, and let's get into the story. In 2013, I was 21 years old and studying abroad in South America with my college roommate. I had more than one unsettling encounter while down there, but I'm an experienced traveler and generally have good instincts, so I can't say I have any other thrilling stories aside from narrowly dodging a few muggings. Other than the general sense of unease that can come with being a solo female traveler, well, pair of solo female travelers, our 4-month stay was relatively unexciting. Relatively. At the end of our program, we decided to stay for some extra time and do some more casual backpacking. We ended up deciding to hike the Inca Trail. Amazing for anyone considering it. For the unfamiliar, you start in one location, which varies depending on the trek you choose, and then you end in a small town near Machu Picchu called Aguascalientes. Your return trip is covered by your hiking company, unless you choose to stay, in which case you get a refund. Well, we were in a new town and our company left immediately after lunch, and we wanted to spend the night and get the most out of being in that part of the country. The time came and we said farewell to 11 of our 12 hiking companions, and were joined by one other of our new friends, who was planning on starting an additional hike in the morning. Our guides gave us our refund and gave us very careful instructions on how to get back to Cusco, the city we had originally departed from. When you're ready to leave, make your way to that train station right there. Don't go anywhere else. It's a very official and safe train. Once you get to the last stop, go to the official bus station and it will bring you back to Cusco. We understood, thanked them, and parted ways. That night we went out drinking with the remaining member of our hiking party. He didn't drink because of his grueling hike the next day, but we had a blast and felt safer for having a meal with us. Overall, we made sure to keep our wits about us, and it turns out to be a very fun night without incident. We make our way back to the hostel, wish him well in his travels, and go to bed, ready to explore town the next day before catching the train home. We have our fun, then make our way to the train station. It's a very nice train, not unlike the ones I take in the US occasionally, maybe even nicer. It definitely felt very safe. The train pulls into the final station, and we begin trying to locate the bus station. We ask a gentleman who clearly works at the stop, and he points and tells us to walk about a half mile that direction, and we wouldn't be able to miss it. We thank him and continue. I want to pause here to emphasize, all of these conversations and the ones that follow are entirely in Spanish. This isn't too important, but it's good for you to understand that I was speaking a language I was extremely proficient in, but not fluent. It's not too difficult for native speakers to talk quickly and avoid being understood. We walk for what actually does not seem like enough time, less than a half mile for sure, before coming across a bus station. I'm shocked to say the least, but I'm also reminding myself that I come from a much nicer part of the world and I need to put aside my preconceived notions. It has a sign clearly labeling it the bus station, and it says, "To Cusco," right on the sign. To be clear, it's not a fake sign. It's similar to a sign marking a gas station from a freeway big thick pole, and the actual sign was probably 50 feet in the air. It could not have been a temporary trick, otherwise I would have been much more suspicious. Aside from that sign though, well, it was something alright. The buses were all the classic Bad News White van. You know the ones. Again, I checked myself. How many people could possibly travel to Cusco in a day here? It wouldn't make sense to have a giant 20-plus seater bus doing the trek every day. There's a tiny wooden building, presumably an office, underneath the big sign, but we didn't need to go in there as there are two gentlemen standing outside near the vans. We asked them if these are the buses to Cusco, though we can clearly read on the sign that they are, and the men confirm. We ask how much the tickets cost and when they plan on departing. They give us the price and say 5-10 minutes, and then direct us to a van to sit and wait in. We both sit down, and I'll admit it, I was uneasy. Again, I'm an experienced traveler, and I do know not to expect modern luxuries in the less developed parts of the world, and there's nothing outwardly sinister about this bus stop, but it just wasn't what I was expecting, even for the area. My roommate does not seem to be sharing any of my trepidation, however. She's a bit more sheltered and generally trusting, so that's fairly in character for her. I'm also an over worrier, so between us, we are probably both on the more extreme side of the appropriate emotion, me silently freaking out and her a little too relaxed. We wait for over 10 minutes in this van, which we've left the door open due to the heat. We are just talking and swatting flies, which are buzzing in and out of the open door. I'm unsurprised we're not on schedule, as I know they are trying to avoid wasting a tank of gas on 2 passengers and are trying to wait for more people. But we have an hour's drive ahead of us, and I want to get going, so I decide to go ask. They tell us 5 more minutes. Sure, more time passes and I can't shake the feeling we aren't at the right bus station, though nobody made mention of there being more than one in a tiny town, so I kept telling myself I was being irrational. I decide to go see if anybody is in the office and just get more information. I open the door and walk in without much hesitation. Given its positioning under the large sign, well, I enter what is clearly a residence, and like 15 locals cooking beans and looking as surprised to see me as I am to see them. I say out, is this Dot? Bus ... station? They look confused and then say, oh, the bus, yes, the bus. Go outside. Talk to the men. Bus to Cusco. I step back and apologize for entering by mistake. I go back to the van to report the experience to my roommate, right as another girl walks up and says, bus to Cusco? She is clearly a native Spanish speaker and not a foreign tourist. The men immediately say yes and place her in a different van, which makes no sense if they are trying to fill one van to take us to the same place. This makes me uneasy more than anything else that's happened yet. I pop my head in the van and tell my roommate to keep staying put. I walk over to the girl in the other van, where she is also waiting alone, and ask her if she's going to Cusco. She confirms this is the case, and I explain we are going there as well, and I'm not sure why we would be in separate vans. She says she doesn't know, but seems generally unconcerned. I return to our van and sit down again quietly. I go back and sit in the van, which my roommate has not left, and we've been there for probably near 30 to 40 minutes at this point. I start sharing my concerns with her, but she is somewhat dismissive, which I can't blame her for, as I'm a generally anxious person and she is more used to that than anyone. We become pretty quiet and settle into waiting, still swatting flies and dabbing our brows with our shirts. I'm now sitting quietly with my mind going through possibilities and feeling suspicious something is wrong, but also admitting there's nothing concrete justifying my level of concern. At this point, I'm picturing some scheme involving foreigners or serious harm. It's not a good feeling and I feel uneasy still. The flies are driving me absolutely mad at this point, and now I've decided they are probably hovering around the car because somebody was murdered in there and the blood wasn't cleaned well enough to fool the flies. At this point, I'm just torturing myself. The train of thought continues, and I look up. Hundreds of flies are swarmed and crawling on the roof of the van. I realize we hadn't noticed because only a few would be flying around at a time, and the van was rather spacious, and my roommate and I were closer to the front while the mass grouping of them was closer to the back. I'm frozen in fear at this point, unsure if this is confirming my theory that somebody was murdered in the car, or if I'm really letting my imagination run wild and there are less remarkable things than flies in a South American van. I'm basically hyperventilating. I wish I could emphasize how many flies were in there. I gesture upwards to my roommate, who looks up then appears shocked. At this point I can assume I'm shaking my head and muttering. Right as this happens, the other van with the native girl begins to pull away. I make a snap-second decision. I launch myself out of our van and start sprinting and slam my hand on her van to bring it to a stop. She opens the door in shock, and I grab the door to hold it open and say more forcefully than I thought I had in me, "We are coming with you." I look back at my roommate, who is just staring, and I yell, "Grab our bags and run now." She knew better than to mess with my when I'm in crisis mode and comes sprinting out of the other van with both backpacks in hand while I keep my hand on the door. The 2 men come running after her saying, "Don't go." We leave now. We leave for Cusco now, as I shove my friend into the car and scream, "Sorry, we are riding with our friend here," and slam the door closed. The native girl, looking unsettled, tells the driver we are friends and to drive. At this point, I don't know whether the driver is involved in anything suspicious or not, or whether he simply didn't plan to turn away locals in this situation either. Either way, I see her as our best option. We pull out onto the road and drive for a few minutes when I see, you guessed it, the bus station. a very official, legitimate looking bus station with actual buses, which was probably about half a mile from the train. I have no doubt this is where we were supposed to go and feel the blood drain from my face. I thought about jumping out of the van and running, but in a split second I questioned if it wasn't for official tour groups or anything else I may not be considering, and my worst fear is ending up back at the first place without our new local friend. As we drive, I'm looking for street signs, landmarks, or anything to indicate we are actually headed to Cusco. All I see is wide open desert plains and nothing else. I sat the rest of the drive frozen in fear, collecting a pile of makeshift items from what I could find in the back of the van. This included a sharp piece of car, likely from some previous collision, and a smallish fire extinguisher. I told myself if anybody tried to hurt us, I would protect us first and then figure out how to handle the situation afterward carefully. I spent the entire car ride telling myself that I could stay calm and handle things if anything went wrong in that moment eventually. I held my items tightly until my knuckles turned white, when suddenly the van came to a stop, much in the middle of nowhere. The driver accepts a phone call, which I can't understand. He then gets off the phone and slowly tells us he just remembered he can't take us all the way to Cusco. The native girl looks concerned, which makes me even more uneasy, and he proceeds to point to a large but empty looking building and tells us to go in there to find a ride the rest of the way. Looking back, I'm not sure how I avoided throwing up from anxiety and fear. The three of us journey in there, my weapons abandoned as I couldn't sneak them out of the van, and people just keep pointing us farther and farther back until we come to a back opening leading us outside. I wanted to run, to somehow undo this entire journey, but we really had no choice other than to stick with the native girl. We had no alternative methods of transportation. There's no civilization in sight. And honestly, I'm not even sure what part of the country we are in. All I know is we are 60 to 90 minutes away from wherever the train stopped, hopefully in the direction of Cusco. We get to another van, this time with the opposite problem. They are insisting we fit 10 plus people into 7-seater van. They try and take my backpack, saying it needs to go on the roof. That backpack had my passport and every resource I would most certainly want in an emergency. I'm thinking they can take it over my dead body, which might very well be happening right as I see my roommate happily passing hers to the lady. I grab her arm angrily and ready to ask what on earth is wrong with her survival instincts, but my face must have said it all because she backs up and uncertainly tells the lady, never mind, she will be keeping her bag with her. The lady looks aggravated and says they won't fit in the car with all the people. And I tell her we are happy to hold them as I climb in and demonstrate in a way that will require her to force either me or the bag out. She relents and my roommate crawls in. We sit in the back with our backpacks towering on our laps in front of us. My roommate looking somewhat inconvenienced I've made her do this. Honestly, maybe I was overreacting, but better that than underreacting. We drive a long while and finally we enter the city borders of Cusco. On the one hand, I'm relieved because I now know exactly where we are. On the other hand, the surrounding areas outside of the main square are extremely dangerous shanty towns, and we're the only foreigners with giant backpacks on the bus. No sooner am I thinking, well, at least we are close when the bus driver turns and says he doesn't want to drive further and we can figure our own way from there. Even the native girl immediately goes on red alert and offers to pay more if he will take us to the city square. He declines, kicks us out of the bus, and drives away. We are looking at all the people staring openly at us, and she asks in a scared voice if we will split a cab with her. We agree immediately. Problem is, in this part of the world, a cab is often the first car to drive up and assures you they will take you where you are going. Not very official. This is exactly what happens. A Corolla from I'm sure 1993 pulls up and tells us to hop in. Our friend looks wary but decides it's better than winging it out in the open. He drops us in the town square without incident, and at this point the native girl looks like she's aged 5 years since we first crossed paths with her hours ago. I'm sure I looked even worse. She meekly says, well, I'm glad we got here safely. I can barely talk, I'm so exhausted, and respond, me too, thanks, and we part ways. I had a few incidents on this trip that made me a believer that no matter where you are, one traumatic experience makes wherever the last place you slept feel like home. Let me tell you, the hostel bed felt just like home. This may seem like an obvious observation, but I'm embarrassed to say I hadn't made the connection until tonight. When we hiked the Inca Trail, there were a lot of tourists. When we stayed in Aguas Calientes, there were a lot of tourists. When we took the train, there were a lot of tourists. When we took the buses back to the most touristy city in the country, there were no tourists. I feel this confirms a lot of things about our experience. Man, that story was absolutely intense. Talk about trusting your gut. It sounds like that instinct might have seriously saved the day. The way that situation kept spiraling from one sketchy stop to another is honestly the stuff of nightmares. What do you guys think? Would you have stayed in that first van, or would you have bolted like they did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for hanging out for this one. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next upload, and I'll see you in the next video.